Hello again and very welcome to the chapter about restriction. Here in this chapter, we will have a look at different ideas related to the prevention of the opponent's plans. We won't let our opponent carry out the plans or the moves that he's planning to carry out. If we speak about this in very simple terms, if we look at the board from the very beginning, when you play, for example, with white pieces d4, actually, I think we talked about this previously. Actually, black's two main replies here, both d5 and knight f6, they actually have in common that they don't let white carry out the move e4. So you could say that already at this point, black is actually carrying out a restrictive measure here, knight f6, in order to prevent the move e4. If we continue with this position, let's say white plays here c4, black plays e6, let's say white plays knight c3. Here you can already see that white is about to play e4. White would very much like to play e4 here. And that explains, for example, the reason why the Nimzo-Indian defense exists. The move bishop e4, it's designed, apart from the fact that black is developing their pieces, it's designed to prevent the move e4 from white. So it's a typical restrictive measure, you could say here, actually, bishop b4. So for this reason, if you look at opening theory, for example, if you look at this position, not many people would play b6 here, because, well, that would give white a chance to play e4. On the other hand, if white plays something else here, let's say knight f3, then the move b6, it's much more popular, because here there was no threat of e4, black didn't have any reason to try to prevent it. And if we stay at this point, in this position, one of the most popular variations here for white, there are many different choices here for white, sometimes they play g3, sometimes they play knight c3, but there is one interesting variation here, which is the Petrosian variation, which was used a lot by Garry Kasparov, for example, and that's the move a3. So if you look at this move, why do you think white plays a3 here? Is he perhaps about to play b4, gaining space? No, not really. The only idea I would say with a3 is that white would like to play knight c3 without letting black play bishop b4. So if black plays here bishop e7, which is the main move, you can bet that white will play knight c3. Now they don't have to worry about bishop b4 anymore, no doubling of their pawns, and also the knight is helping white's future plans here, like for example play d5 and e4. So I would say this is a typical case of how you can apply restrictive thinking from the very beginning of the game. White would very much like to put the knight on c3, but they're not so happy about the bishop coming to b4 and perhaps swapping it or simply preventing white's future play in the center. That's the reason why the move a3 exists. It's such a popular move, despite the fact that you could say that it's losing time, it's not helping development, it's not taking control of the center in a strict physical meaning of the word, but it's a very useful restrictive move. So that's about restriction in the very opening. Well, in this chapter, I would like to have a look at three different games, which I think show three different ways of applying restrictive thinking. In our first example, we will see how we can restrict the opponent's ideas like move by move in a very concrete way. In our second example, we will see how we can prevent the opponent's long-term plans. They have prepared an attack, for example, and we will try to prevent that attack. And in our third example, we will see how we can actually limit specific enemy pieces. For example, a bishop, we won't let that bishop or that knight get a lot of activity. We will use basically our pawns in order to restrict those pieces. And by now, as you have seen, it's clear that actually the pawns are extremely useful in this, because the pawns are the pieces with less value, so nobody wants to step on the squares that the pawns are controlling, so to speak. The pawns are the perfect protagonists of this idea of restriction. All right, let's start with our first example. This is a famous game between Nigel Short with white pieces and Garry Kasparov, a really heavyweight battle. And here, as you can see, we have a double-edged position. White, Nigel Short, has the bishop pair. He also has the open f-file. The pawn is on e5, which in most contexts, I would say, promises attacking chances because black does not have a knight defender on f6. On the other hand, you can also say that if black is able to swap a few pieces here, they might be doing fine here. If black is able to play something like bishop c5, that would be great for black, because they would swap off that bishop on d4, and later on perhaps they could create some counterplay in the center. But we should notice something here very important. We should notice that the knight on e8 is badly placed. So I don't know really the destiny of this knight. It would have been better off at d7, but I guess it wasn't possible earlier on in this game. However, if we think exclusively about our own ideas here, it's clear that we would like to attack. We would like to bring more pieces to the attack. So a natural move, if we're just thinking about ourselves here, we would play something like rook f3, and then we could play rook af1 with pressure at f7. Maybe we can play, let's say, h4, h5, or maybe we can bring the rook to h3, try to attack on the h file, and so on, many ideas. Unfortunately, if we play like this, we would give black a chance to play bishop c5. And as you can see, black is very happy to swap bishops here, because if white takes, well, we can take with the queen with the black pieces, and later on perhaps we can use the d file for a counterattack. And also the pawn on e5 becomes a little more weak. On top of that, maybe we were able to bring in the knight somehow, later on activate that knight. On the other hand, if white doesn't take on c5, well, we can take on d4, and in that case, we're creating a target on d4. So that's what could happen if white thinks only about their own play here. In the game instead, Short probably thought for himself that, okay, I'm going to attack here, but first I would like to neutralize Kasparov's possible counterplay. First, I would like to limit their ideas, and only after that, only when they don't have anything really active to undertake, then I will go for an attack. And that's what happened in the game. So can you guess what Nigel Short played here? Can you see how he can prevent black's plan of playing bishop c5? You got it. We will use those little guys, the pawns. b4 was played in the game. Very, very clever move. Only if you understand prophylactic or restrictive thinking, you can come up with this move, because it's not related to our main objective here, the black king. It's something different. No, it's related to our opponent's forthcoming plans. So b4, very strong move here. Black played in the game. Knight e7. It's clear what black has in mind. They want to play knight f5, try to improve the knight and fight against white's strong grip in the center. Speaking about restriction, I'm pretty sure you can come up with white's next move, right? You don't want to allow them to play knight f5, I mean. So can we prevent it? We sure can. g4, of course. Very nice move, as you can see. This is not really an attacking move, it's more of a restrictive move. That knight won't be able to set on f5 in this game. Here, Kasparov tried h5. It's pretty clear what white should play. We should, of course, keep the knight restricted. Here we see the situation which I was talking about in the beginning, that sometimes we can restrict a specific enemy piece. That's what Short is doing here by playing h3. Kasparov tried on the other flank with a5, trying to soften up the white pawn structure, but it's very easy to see what white should reply here. Of course, no way we will let them play bishop c5. We should just keep things the way they are. So a3, very good move. Now, suddenly, black has run out of active ideas. In the game, they played here rook d7, and since there is no real threat or no real strong idea for black here, Short resumes the kingside attack, rook f3. Here, Kasparov plays queen d8, and now we should again have a look here. Okay, there are two black pieces along the d-file. What might that mean? Well, if we look closely, we can see that there is a tactical idea for black here. They would like very much to take on b4, and after a takes b4, take on b4 with the bishop, right? Because the pawn on c3 would be overloaded to the d4 bishop. So for that reason, we should not play something like rook f1 here, which would be the normal move if we don't think too much, if we don't pay too much attention to our opponent's ideas. Well, black would then take on b4, and after a takes b4, bishop takes b4, as you can see, black would win a pawn here, and things would become a little more complex. So what did Short play in the game? Well, he simply prevented black's idea of taking on b4 by playing the move rook b1. Again, it's an alien move if you don't see the idea of preventing your opponent's plans, because you would think that, okay, this rook belongs on the king side, so on. However, here it's important first to neutralize your opponent's plans, restrict your opponent. Bishop g5 was played in the game. Now there is no real threat from black, so time to continue with the attack. Rook bf1, black took on b4. Of course, we will take back simply with the a-pawn. And here it was a difficult situation for black. Maybe, just maybe, it was better to play here h4. You will soon see the reason why. But still, the position is difficult here for black. It's not easy for them to activate themselves. One possible move here, queen e2, targeting the pawn on b5 and also getting ready to triple along the f file. After that, there would be tactical ideas such as bishop takes g6. However, in the game, after 8x before, Kasparov played bishop e7 instead. And here, as you can see, there is the same threat of bishop takes before, which made short play in the game rook b1. And here Kasparov played h4 after queen e3, knight e8. He actually managed to bring the knight a little closer to the action, and the game was later drawn. However, this was a critical position, and this is very difficult because now we spent so much time on preventing our opponent's ideas, and actually at this moment it was time to do completely the opposite. It was time to play ourselves for an attack. There is a very nice combination here that unfortunately short didn't carry out in the game, but now we will carry it out. So here, bottom line, we have so many pieces directed at attack. Black doesn't have many defenders there. For example, the queen is not really helping in the defense. So how do you think white should continue here? Can you see some interesting continuation for white, some tempting sacrifice perhaps? You're right. First we take on h5. The reason is that later on we should be able to take on g6 with check. So that after knight takes h5, here we go. Rook takes f7. After rook takes f7, rook takes f7, king takes f7. Here you can see clearly why the knight should be on h5. We should be able to take on g6 with check. After king f8, we don't take that knight. Instead, we can give this very nice check on h6. As you can see, here black is going to get mated, because if they play king f7, you can just give mate here in a few moves, right? Queen h, bishop g6, and queen h, yeah, this is going to be mate next turn on f7 or on h8. On the other hand, if black covers with a knight, we have a very nice silent move here. Instead of giving check on h8, we can first limit the black king's possibilities by playing bishop g6. Extremely nice combination. As you can see, these silent moves are easy to omit. Maybe that's what short didn't see in the game, who knows. And here, as you can see, queen h8 is coming up. Yeah, king g8 would just let white mate anyway. So this is the way in which the game could have concluded. However, it went in a different way. Anyway, summing up, what we have seen here is a very, very nice display of restrictive thinking from Nigel Short. Important move here, b4, preventing bishop c5. Later, after knight g7, he played g4, preventing knight f5. Black tried to soften up white's pawns, h5. No way, we will take there. Then he can take with the knight, and the knight would get better. So it's much better to play h3 to indirectly keep controlling the f5 square. And basically the same thing happened on the queen side. a5, trying to soften up our pawns to get some counterplay with bishop c5 perhaps. No way. a3, and in this way we keep total control here. Only after that, white was ready to resume the kingside attack with rook f3 and rook af1. All right, now let's have a look at how we can, here we saw, limiting the opponent move by move, but now let's have a look at how we can limit a whole plan for the opponent, so to speak. In this game, with the white pieces, Konguvel, and playing back with the black pieces, Markowski. Here, as you can see, we have a very closed position. Actually, I will flip the board here. If we look carefully, we can see that both sides would like to attack. White would very much like to advance on the king side, moves like h4, g5, and knight g3, and so on. While black, at some moment, they would like to play, let's say, knight c7 or b5. Even b5 immediately, in gambit style, like a Benko gambit, play b5 here. However, it's black to play, and I'm sure that Markowski was considering to play here the move b5, but he must have thought that somehow white's attack might be more promising. White could play something like knight g3 here, trying to move to f5. When black plays g6, preventing that, white would have a nice, well, I wouldn't say really pawn sacrifice, but it looks like a pawn sacrifice. White could play here h4. So what's going on? Well, black cannot really take that pawn because queen h2 would be completely decisive here. As you can see, no way black can defend here. The knight is ready to go to f5 at some moment if black plays g5. So probably Markowski thought about this possibility to start an attack. It's always tempting to start an attack before the opponent, so to speak. But he must have concluded that after b5, knight g3, it's easy for white to attack. Black can advance or black can take, but still they need more pieces to attack. While it seems that white actually has more pieces ready for their attack with knight f5, h4, and so on. Yeah, I should also mention that after d6, h4, of course, black is not forced to take, but h5 is coming up, queen h2 is coming. Very hard to play with the black pieces here. You wish your king was somewhere else, right? Anyway, in the game, he must have asked himself, okay, I would like to attack, but can I first perhaps prevent my opponent's attack? And he found a very nice move in order to prevent the white attack as such, the complete idea of attacking with white pieces here against the black king. So which move do you think he played here with black? Which move do you like for black in order to complicate white's attack? You're completely right. It's a funny move. You don't go to h4 with your bishop in every game. But here it's a very, very good move because simply we don't let them play h4. So they are unable to play h4 to open up the h file for their attack. And this is a very annoying bishop. It's not easy to get rid of him because since white played f3, there is no knight g1, knight f3, for example. It's not so easy to swap it for the white bishop. This is a good bishop, so to speak. If we speak about the value of these bishops, probably the bishop on e3 is the good bishop, so it's not easy to swap it, and maybe you don't even want to swap it. So, fantastic move, bishop h4. Let's see what happened in the game. Knight g3, of course, the knight would like to go to f5, but that won't happen. You can guess black's next move here, restriction in its most typical form. Use the pawns in order to eliminate squares from the opponent's pieces. White played king b1. Already at this point, it was possible to play like in gambit style here, b5, but black is not in a hurry. He played first knight g7. This makes a lot of sense. We bring some more pieces to the king side just in case something will happen there. Here white played bishop d3, more development, queen e7, some prophylactics moves, and after bishop h6, maybe this was not the right choice, but okay, I'm not convinced how to progress with white in any other case. Here black played move f6. At first sight, it looks slightly ugly to play like this. Why are we weakening our king? Well, the point is that black has a very nice positional threat here. If white plays just some routine move, let's say they play rook g1, what do you think black would play here? Aha, that's a very nice move, bishop g5. Only if you understand restriction, you will understand this move, because after bishop takes g5, f takes g5, as you can see, now it's very, very difficult for white to progress in this attack, because if h4, we can always take that pawn, right? So it will take white a lot of time to build up an attack. And of course, black is happy to have this semi-open f file to work on. So nice move, f6. White, seeing this threat of bishop g5, positional threat, he simply returned the bishop to e3. Black played rook f7, more prophylaxis. When you have little space on the board, it's important to use those squares in a clever way. And that's what is going on here. After queen g2, knight f8, black is bringing more pieces to the king side just in case. This game actually makes me think of Tigran Petrosyan, who would play in a very similar way, bringing the pieces to the most exposed part of the board in advance, so to speak. This is more actually a prophylactic concept. So knight ge2 was played by white, and now bishop d7. You might be asking yourself, what is white playing for them? These maneuvers, what are they good for? Well, the answer comes here, because now white finally decides that since they cannot really play h4, I mean, they could try something like queen h3 here, but black could perhaps protect the bishop with g5, or maybe if they, after so much mobilization to the king side, maybe they could even play here f5. I think this might also work. So it's not easy for white to progress, and they finally decided that they have to strike in the center instead. So they played here f4. In a way, this is logical because the bishop, I mean, the dark square bishop is not around anymore. It's not going to be able to fight for the long diagonal probably. But even so, after e takes f4, knight takes f4, rook b8, it's already black who is having the better attacking chances here. After queen e2, black finally decided that it was time to strike. Played here b5. This would be natural for you to give up a pawn in order to create some counterplay. But I don't think that they're giving up a pawn, because I can see that there is a pattern here with a piece which is overloaded, right? This bishop and also the knight, they are attacking this pawn, but at the same time they have to protect that pawn. So most probably white cannot take on b5 here. I mean, if they take with, let's say with the bishop, we can probably take and then take the pawn on e4. Yeah, this looks very nice for black. So in the game, instead, after the move b5, white simply ignored this tension on the queen side, playing rook d2. And here we had a funny move, I would say, because here I will be contradicting myself. I was saying that the black bishop would not be able to get back to the long diagonal, but actually it will be possible because black played here f5. Very, very nice move. As you can see, now black creates some tension along the f file, and also the bishop might come back to its best possible diagonal here. G takes f5, G takes f5, rook g1, creating some pressure along the g file, but b4, in this way, black wins a pawn. The pawn on e4 will now fall. After queen c2, after bishop c2, sorry, queen e5, queen g2, black played here simply bishop f5, protecting the pawn on e4. They were a pawn up, and they later on went on to win. So as you can see, white's attack actually never really got going. Why not? Well, because black found this very nice restrictive move, bishop h4, completely neutralizing, preventing the white attack, I would say, by just one move. But of course, the rest was also important. To play here after knight g3, it was important to play g6 in order to limit the idea of knight f5. And later on, the move knight g7 also is very important. I forgot to say that sometimes there are sacrifices coming up like rook g1 and knight f5. So in this case, it's very useful, of course, to have our knight here on g7. So very nice way of thinking here of the Polish Grandmaster Markowski, the move bishop h4. It's easy to miss. You won't see it actually if you're just thinking about attacking yourself. But if you're paying attention to your opponent's ideas, you can find strong moves like this bishop h4. All right, let's see one more example, which is more focused on limiting the opponent's pieces. In this game, between with the white pieces, Malachov, and playing black Narciso, we have some kind of queenless middle game, you could say. If you look at this position like very quickly, you would think that perhaps it's going to be a draw very soon. At least that's what I thought when I saw this position. I was saying, okay, white has nothing here, nothing going on. Pawn structure is symmetric, black is well developed. And I was impressed by the way in which Malachov won this game, because he needed only like 15 moves to get the big advantage here and win the game. So how is it possible from this simple position to win so quickly against a grandmaster? Yeah, impressive. So let's see if we can understand this together. It's white to play here, and if we look at the black pieces, we can see that probably black's pieces are not less active than white's pieces, right? They look rather well placed. You might even argue that this bishop is more active than their white counterpart. However, here at this moment, Malachov uses a key move here in order to limit the black pieces. The bishop on b7 and the knight on f6, they can actually be limited by the white pawns. So how would you use the white pawns in order to limit those two pieces? That's it. Instead of, swapping pieces with bishop e5 or something like that, Malachov played here f3. So what's going on? Why weaken your kingside? Well, we're about to play e4. Once the pawn is on e4, as you can see, the bishop on b7 is perhaps not a good bishop anymore, and the knight on f6 won't be able to use this d5 square, like a transit square for the knight, which can be very useful for the knight. So nice move, f3. Black played in the game rook hc8. This makes a slightly funny impression. Why shouldn't we use the other rook? I think that Narciso simply wanted to keep an eye on this pawn on a6. That's why he brought that rook. But probably it was better to play rook hd8 instead, so that we can use the other rook on c8. Well, maybe. But of course, white could just continue in the same fashion as in the game, playing e4. Rook hc8, we already talked about the next move, e4. As you can see, there is a concrete tactical threat here also. White is threatening to play e5, but that's not the big point. The big point is exactly to limit this bishop on b7 and also limit the movements of the black knight. Here black played bishop c7. It's good to notice that rook c2 was not really a threat here. White could simply play bishop f1 and later on resume the same plan as in the game. The bishop can sometimes go to d4 also if we are bothered by the black rook on c2. So e4, black played bishop c7. In this way, now e5 won't win anything. And you should also notice that this doesn't form part at all of white's plan here. Black would be very happy to play here knight e5. The check on a3 is not really that dangerous for black. There are no queens on the board anymore. Black would be very, very happy to have the knight on d5. And in the game, well, I won't say that white will never play e5, but it will be played in a much different context. So instead of that, white should get their pieces improved. Rook ac1, development, and after black's move g6. Please notice that the knight cannot really move at this point because then the pawn on g7 would fall off. So here black for that reason played g6. Here again, Malakho thinks about what the opponent might have in mind. If we consider that knight e7 might be black's next move here, what do you think white should play? Can you see a way in which we can actually prevent the move knight e7? Indeed, there is one. Knight e5. Nice move. So now there is no knight e7, and also at the same time, as you can see, both our rooks are very active along the open file. So it's not so easy for black to move here in this position. They're very passive here. There is a threat of bishop a3, maybe even our knight could reroute to c4, maybe it can go to d6. By now, white is much more interested in swapping the bishop on c7 than the bishop on b7. Because the bishop on b7, like you see, it's hitting a wall here. It's not active at all. These pawns are very useful for restricting that bishop. In the game, black played here b5, which makes sense, gaining some space and preventing the move knight c4. However, white notices that they can actually fight for this idea of playing knight c4. We didn't speak very much about this bishop, right? We didn't see what it was good for and so on. But here, the bishop proves very useful in white's queenside play. So what do you think white played at this moment? You're completely right. It's time to play a4, clearing up some space for the white pieces. Now the knight might go to c4 later on, and the bishop, of course, once this pawn disappears, it will become a good bishop attacking the pawn on a6. Black took on e5, and after bishop takes e5, already white has the bishop pair. After b takes a4, b takes a4, you can see that still black has issues here. The bishop on b7 is not a good piece at all, which explains their next move in the game, bishop c6. So what do you think we should do about this pawn? I mean, the most natural choice here for white would be to just play a5, right? Fixing the pawn on a6, we don't have to worry about that pawn anymore. However, this would give black a chance to play bishop e5 and solve the problem with their bad bishop, so to speak, their passive bishop. And Malakho doesn't want that to happen in the game. Instead here, first he gave check on d6, and after that he played, after king e8, he played here the nice move rook d8. So again, complete restriction of the poor bishop. This bishop doesn't have a good day at the office, so to speak. Now it's in trouble. There might even come up a move like rook c4 later on. So in the game, black played here knight e7 to keep control of some of the door squares, and after rook dc4 he had to play bishop e7. But by now, as you can see, white is dominating the open file, the c file, and that means that they can actually seize the 7th rank as well. You got it, rook c7. Very, very difficult for black now. We're not really threatening to take on b7 because the rook on c1 is hanging, but black has virtually run out of moves here. To total nightmare. I mean, here we are at move 27. We started this example at move 17, so it's only 10 moves, and look what a complete metamorphosis of the position. Look at those very nice restricting pawns on f3 and e4. King d8 was played in the game, and only now white plays a5 when they are sure that the bishop cannot profit from that move. So very difficult for black. They played rook ab8. Not a nice move to play, of course, putting the rook in the line of fire. However, there was nothing better. White now proceeds with another technical move. If we look at all the pieces, we can see that there is one which could actually be improved. You're right, the bishop on e2 might be able to find a better diagonal here. That's what happened in the game, bishop d1. So that after black's next move, bishop a8, white can play bishop a4. With a lot of pressure at black, as you can see, the knight cannot even move because then it's mate in 1. So white soon went on to win. And you know, I was wrong. I was saying that white would play e5, but actually that never happened. It wasn't necessary in this example. Just by using the queenside pawn in a clever way, a4, white was able to build up a lot of pressure anyway. Summing up, what we have seen here, perfect display of how to use your pawns in order to restrict your opponent's pieces. The position looked a bit drawish, but the move f3 followed by e4 changed the picture completely, I would say. After f3, rook, hc8, e4, it was not easy for black at all to create any activity here. And you know, actually I'm familiar with this kind of position because sometimes when I play the hedgehog myself, sometimes I'm unlucky to end up in this kind of situation where I have my bishop, supposedly strong bishop on the long diagonal, but as soon as white plays here f3 and e4, it becomes difficult to do something with that bishop. Yeah, we're very, very far away from playing f5 here. That would be a nice idea, but it's not going to happen simply here. So very nice play by Grandmaster Malakhov. We have seen 3 examples about restriction in middle game strategy. We saw Nigel Short, move by move, preventing Kasparov's ideas, the pawn on b4 preventing bishop c5, the pawn on g4 preventing knight f5, and so on. We saw how Markovsky played this very, very nice move, bishop h4, in order to avoid a white attack, prevent a white attack on the king side. And here we saw Malakhov restricting the black minor pieces by means of f3 and e4. All right, thanks for watching and see you in the next chapter.